Following the Golden Rule with Andrew Faas is proudly supported by Remax St. Andrews. Live and vacation by the sea. Choose wisely. Choose Remax.
Hello, my name is Andrew Faas. Welcome to Following the Golden Rule.
And I'm Jay Remer, your co-host. For 26 weeks, Andy and I will be discussing the ABCs of building character. We've done 7 shows so far, and we very much appreciate the comments and questions that you've left on our social media. Today we're going to be discussing H is for honesty. Before we start though, Andy, I'm wondering how you selected H, honesty, for the letter, because there's so many.
Yeah, well, actually, we changed the letter from being humble to honest, and a couple of reasons for that. And the most significant is a discussion I had with somebody that I know on the current scandals that are going on in Canada with the We charity and the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, and with the Governor General who is being accused of being a Karen and creating a toxic work environment. Mm-hmm. And realize that we're dealing with something pretty fundamental here. Mm-hmm. What we're going through is an exercise where people get to understand themselves and what they stand for. Mm-hmm. And being honest, if the person is honest, they may score low on all of the other characteristics, and yet be a person of character.
Yes.
However, being authentic, or being believable, or being courageous, or being dependable, or being fair, or being grateful, if you're all of those things and you're not honest, it's not likely that you're going to cut the grade or make the grade relative to being a person of character.
Well, I think one of the things that we've established in this series is the importance of relationships, and that relationships are an important building block of any kind of organization, family, your life in general. And honesty is obviously, well, not obvious. It's not obvious to everyone, apparently, but it is an umbrella that covers everything. And if you're not honest, it's kind of like a black mark, it's like a black ball on your character. It's that important.
Well, I agree. And if we talk about definition of culture, whether it's a family unit or a business or a country, then culture is defined by the relationships we have, and relationships are defined by the value exchange propositions that you have with the various people that you enter into a relationship with. And it may not be explicitly stated, but honesty from the day we're born should be should be expected. Mm-hmm. and developed over time and reinforced. So the relationship you have with your parents, with your teacher, with your fellow students, with your employer, with your coworkers, etc. As you go through life, they're all premised on expectations. And I often hear people hope that the person they're in the relationship with or entering the relationship with is going to be honest. Mm-hmm. and hope is another good characteristic, but hope is not sufficient in terms of expectations that we have of one another. And so we should differentiate between being hopeful versus expecting. And if the expectation is not delivered on, then there should be accountabilities. Because the relationship becomes strained.
Yeah, I know that oftentimes when I talk to people about their relationships, expectations are often a tripping block. People have unreasonable expectations. But if you're entering a new relationship, or even if you're trying to maintain a working relationship, if all of a sudden someone does something that is dishonest, and it's like a it's like, oh, this is not right. It will completely change the relationship, because you suddenly have no trust in that person anymore. What is your advice for people who find themselves in that position? Because it's not only going to happen at work. Possibly, it could happen in your family. It could happen almost anywhere. How do you handle such situations?
Well, it depends on the situation, and I've been as an employer, I've had to handle a number of situations where we've had to terminate the employment of all too many people. I've had to sever my relationship with vendors or contractors. I've had to sever my relationship with friends, and it's in most cases, it's not the transgression that was the reason for the severing. The reason usually for the severing is people try to deny it. People try to without convincing us. People tried to deflect it, blame others. People tried to cover it up, and it's what people did with it after the transgression. Brings back something that happened to me when I was fairly young as a manager. I got the dubious honor, I guess, of having to hire and mentor the boss's son-in-law.
Oh.
And to say he was a not a good fit was being kind, but we didn't terminate him because he wasn't a bad fit. We terminated him because there was a transgression, and he covered it up, and he blamed somebody else. And I gave the boss a heads up, that I was going to do this, not seeking permission, but indicating you should be aware. And the boss tried to talk me out of it. And I said, well, and he said, it's a minor infraction. I said, well, we're not terminating him because of a minor infraction. We're terminating him because of the cover-up and deflection and trying to blame somebody else. So if that's okay, and you're directing me to reverse our position on this, then I have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. You have a different problem.
So anyway, it's one example. Just getting back to the reason another reason I changed the topic to honest is what we're going through in Canada again with the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and a Governor General. And I cannot understate the outrage I feel relative to how that's all coming down. And personally, I discussed it with, indicated, well, it's kind of a minor thing compared to what the President of the United States is doing. And I said, well, I understand that, and I agree, in relative terms. But I view this as a lost opportunity for Canada being put at risk, because we have the opportunity today to be a beacon of light, to be a role model for an honest and we're a society, a civil society, one where there's equality, fairness, and inclusiveness. And that is being put to risk because there is an ethical cloud over the heads of the top three positions in government. And if that is our standard, then there's no way we can become that honest and civil society. An example for it.
I find that it's interesting that comparison between Canada and the U.S. And people tend to. It's not unusual for people to try to diminish, bad, unethical acts if there's something that can compare it to, but the act is still. If it's a dishonest act, it's still a dishonest act. If it's less dishonest than somewhere else, it doesn't matter. It's still dishonest, and it is a problem that is. It's a very fundamental problem that cannot be diminished. Certainly should not be diminished.
In terms of importance,
Yes.
and I think we need to, expand on being dishonest. Or being honest, and it goes much beyond just stealing something or lying about something. We also have to look at the whole question of people being intellectually honest. Yesterday, we saw that in the intellectual dishonesty in full view during the bar hearings. In Congress yesterday. And tomorrow our Prime Minister is going in front of a committee, and I'd advise him to watch the bar hearings, and if he does a bar, then that will be very telling for people in terms of whether or not he can be trusted.
Where do you fit intention into all of this? Because I think that might be behind how this dishonest person puts the word out. Like they have this evil intention of really being disruptive. At least that's what I saw yesterday with Barr. He was just flat out lying, and with a very clear purpose of protecting the president.
Well, intention plays an important part in, or determining intention plays a pretty important part in how people make an assessment as to what they should do in continuing the relationship. And it's something that people should always look at. Is the person intentionally trying to distort it for questionable purposes? Or is the person doing it with ill intent in terms of forcing a position on susceptible people, or deflecting an issue, or pinning the blame on somebody else. And I talked about having to separate relationships with people, and that is not always necessary. If it's not ill-intended, then you just don't say, because you've been dishonest with me, I don't want anything further to do with you.
Right.
But what you need to do is to understand the nature of the relationship has changed. And yes, you may forgive, but not in all likelihood will you forget.
Right.
And go back to another statistic that I keep using and will keep using and will keep using until it changes. And that's 3/4 of American workers, Canadian American workers, cannot count on the people that they work with, their co-workers, for support when things go wrong.
Yeah.
And that accounts for the loneliness epidemic we're in.
Right.
That's only going to get worse as time goes on. And and research has shown that we can correct that. But the key to it is being honest with each other. And it's, we can always blame the institutions and the systems, but it really starts with the individual. And we have to, be honest with ourselves, intellectually honest with ourselves, in asking some pretty fundamental questions. Yes. Can I trust my son? Can I trust the contractor I've employed? Can I trust my banker? Can I trust my financial advisor?
Yeah.
Can I trust my doctor? Can I trust in with every relationship you have? And that is, it's a fundamental question. I did a bit of work for this. It's some straw polling, and I asked you the question, and don't give me the answer right now, but name 5 people that you have absolute trust in, and why you trust that individual. And your reaction to that.
Yeah.
It was a pretty tough thing to do.
Well, it's a very tough thing to do. I'm actually going through another similar exercise that's equally difficult. And when you're put on the spot and you think, gosh, I am not surrounding myself with trustworthy people or people that I have a good attachment to. It's like these lesser than are the standard that we want has been normalized. And I think it's an indication of the culture of fear, just as the statistics that we've been using are a symptom as well. So how do you go about in relationships, whether they're personal relationships? I've even know people who have to separate out members of their own family because they're so they're a negative energy drain. And it's very difficult when you're in a relationship to say, okay, the time has come, it's over. And I also was taught at one point that if you're going to sever a relationship, do it with like a sharp sword, complete and thorough. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's extreme, and it's not something that I advocate in the first instance.
No.
And everyone deserves opportunity to defend themselves against whatever transgression it was, and if it is out and out lying, then the first step is just help me understand where you're coming from, and then be very clear relative to that not passing my standard of the transgression. But more, and if the discretion is being dishonest, then it's a matter of calling it out. But more importantly, it's being a role model. And I indicated that Canada has an opportunity to be a role model relative to being that honest broker, and it does start, as with all of these characteristics, with the individual. And in the little exercise in terms of naming those 5 people, then ask yourself, would you be on somebody's list? And if there's a question mark there, then what are you doing relative to not being as honest as you could be with them? And the other characteristics, if people work on scoring themselves high on being authentic, believable, and so on and so on and so on, it helps them become more honest. And I think we got to go in this thing on the basis that I included, and most of the people I know, we haven't always been honest with each other. And it's not just out of fear. Sometimes we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings.
True.
If we're working in a toxic environment for a bully boss, yes, there is that fear component. But because you are in that environment, doesn't necessarily mean they have to play by their ground rules.
Right.
And again, by becoming that honest broker within that unit, you play the role model and you become that leader of character.
I think that what I wanted to find out is whether or not honesty and dishonesty, if you see those as intrinsic, because you just said that people can become more honest if they pay attention to these other characteristics and actually do the work to measure themselves, either in the mirror against other people. How do these characteristics rest with us? And you're suggesting that if we pay attention to these other characteristics and do the work, we will become more honest, as opposed to honesty being an intrinsic value.
Well, define intrinsic.
Well, intrinsic, it's kind of like when we were talking about compassion. You're either a compassionate person or you're not a compassionate person. Selective compassion does not make you a compassionate person, but not you. But in honesty, you need to sort of have a pretty pure track record. And if you stumble, I question your intrinsic honesty.
Well, it's based on that, I would say that we've got to go in on the premise that, to some degree, all of us are capable of doing something dishonest, and particularly being intellectually dishonest. And it's being aware of that, alert to that, when you hear it from others, but in particular when you hear it in yourself, and you check yourself.
If we take the time to actually think about these things, we will a lot will be revealed to us.
It will, and let me just add one aspect in changing dynamic, and that's the nature of work. And in the nature of what is very likely to happen is that people will be working from home for the foreseeable future, continue to work from home for the foreseeable future. And for many, it will be for the rest of their career. And what that means is that people are being, by the changing nature of work, being given more opportunity. Mm-hmm. So what is being vested on them is a responsibility. Mm-hmm. And this is where the nature of relationship between the employer and employee changes dramatically. Mm-hmm. And the employee has to trust the employer to the commitments they're making to them, to support them in working from a home and environment. And the employer has to trust the employee to deliver on the expectations without the regular and ongoing managerial input. Yeah. And it's going to be an interesting dynamic, and I've got a lot of faith in given the right conditions, people will be honest and trustworthy relative to delivering on the expectations. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's hope that's the case, and I think that it certainly is a lot of food for thought. Honesty is a big word, and I know that I will certainly be reflecting on it more because it is so important. It is an underpinning. So thank you, Andy, for bringing up such important points about honesty. And we encourage you to do the exercise of thinking about 5 people that you think are completely honest, and weigh yourself against them. How do they feel that you are honest? And honesty is such an important thing, so I hope you'll take the time to really focus on it this week. And we look forward to seeing you again next week when we will be discussing I is for inclusive.
Following the Golden Rule with Andrew Faas is proudly supported by Remax St. Andrews. Live and vacation by the sea. Choose wisely. Choose Remax.